We want to remind you that, again, today is the end of the campaign for TorahAnytime.com. We want to thank Irving for making a page, and if anybody wants to donate on the page, it is on our Zoom Daf, our WhatsApp group, and if you need more information, you could give Irving a buzz. We are holding on. We're holding by Ravina, and now that we just learned in the Agadata Gemara that Rav Ashi and Ravina closed the Gemara, they're known as the editors of Shas. It gives us, a little bit more of a feeling when we hear the name Ravina. Ravina says, and we welcome in Mel Zachter, Irving Fishbaum, Dr. Udell, Dr. Guy, Ruvain Pollack, Shimon Klein, Mark Frankel, we've been missing you, Mark, Yisrael Fisher, Marshall Castle, Mo Kushner, Mo, you're mechazik, all of us, with pneumonia, with corona, 97 years old, and sitting and watching the shir from the hospital. Unbelievable. Aaron Sway, Nachman Chapler, Yitzi Fuchs, Menachem Yamansky, Moshe Lehman, Yitzi Muller, Rabbi Kranz, Shelley Zeitlin, Naftali Javelin, Ilya Shutman, Mitchell Flom, Abe Arbach, Jay Siegel. Here in the shul we have Ruvain Shanit, Rich Lenner, Reb Kramer, Gedalia Berish, Avram Rezepkowitz, and Michal Avram. So Ravina tells us we were struggling to find a makar that a human worker could eat when the stuff is detached, and an animal could eat when the stuff is attached. So Ravina says, Loi Adam Betalish, we don't need a special pasuk for a human when it is detached, V'loi Shar b'mechuber, nor an axe when it's attached, Tzrichei Krai, Dichsiv, because it says, Loi Sachsai Shar b'dishay, you shouldn't muzzle an axe when it threshes. Now, it's not only an axe that you're not supposed to muzzle. You're not allowed to muzzle any animal. So the Gemara says, Michtei, let's examine, as we start the top of Pei Tesam at Aleph, Michtei, Kol Milei Isnu B'chasima. Not only an ox, but every animal is included, because the Alfinon Shar Shar Mishabas, because we learn it out, Gzeir Shav Shar Shar Mishabas. Now this is a funny thing. So since we learn out, just like there's a mitzvah of shvisas behemtuch on all animals and beasts, so you're not allowed to muzzle any animal or any beast. Now since that's the fact, so then it shouldn't say shar. It should just say, Im kein lichterachman loy sidaish, you shouldn't thresh b'chazima. It shouldn't have to say shar. You'll say, but if it doesn't say shar, we wouldn't know the gzeir shav shar shar. If it didn't say shar, we didn't need the gzeir shav shar shar, because we would say that it refers to all animals. So why does it say shar de kas rachman olamali? La kushay choysam lenechsam v'nechsam lechosam. It comes to juxtapose the one that's muzzling to the one that's being muzzled, and the one that's being muzzled to the one that's doing the muzzling. In other words, the chaysim is the human, and the nechsam is the animal. So since it says loisachsaim shar b'dishay, sachsaim is the human that's doing the muzzling. Shar is the animal. So it comes to juxtapose a human worker to an animal worker. Ma choisim, just like a human worker, oichel b'mechuber, because it says vel kel yechaloi sitein, you can't put it into your vessels, but you could take it and eat it, and that's talking about the time you put it in the vessels when you're harvesting. Af nechsam oichel b'mechuber. So the animal that's being muzzled could also eat from that which is attached. Oma nechsam oichel b'talish, and just like the animal that's being muzzled can eat when it's detached, because dishay is normally threshing, is normally when it's detached. So also the human payal eichel betalish, he could eat when it's detached. Now, the pasuk says, "Loisachsem shor b'dishay, dayish threshing, ma dayish miyuchid, davar shegidulei karka." It's something that grows from the ground, upaya loichel bay, and the human could eat from it. Now, even though the pasuk of Loisachsem shor b'dishay is talking about an animal, but it's already juxtaposed. So a human is allowed to eat from something that grows from the ground. Af kol shegidulei karka payaloichel bay. That anything else that grows from the ground, the worker could eat. Yatzah chaylev. This is what we learned in the Mishnah. This excludes if, let's say, Marshall is milking an animal, or v'amechabetz. There's a big machlokes what mechabetz means. The Aruch learns that mechabetz means making butter. Very interesting. There is a Rashi that learns that mechabetz means separating the whey from the milk. Or if he is megabein, if he's making cheese, he can't eat while he's doing this. She'en gedulei karka, it doesn't grow from the ground. The ein payal oichel bay. Says the Gemara, well, lamali, why do I need to learn it out from dayish? Michi savai bekerem reyecha nafka. We should learn it out because it says when you come into the vineyard of your friend, the vineyard is attached from the ground. Says the Gemara, no, it's because solkadai techamina. Remember, we said kerem we would only know grapes, but we learned out because it says kama to tell us all standing items. Hoyoviksiv kama l'rabbis kol bamli kama, anything standing up. I might think that since kama already comes to broaden Kerem Reyecha, I might think it's Rabbis Nami Midei Delav Gidulei Karkanino. I might think it comes to include even that which doesn't grow from the ground. So Kamash Malan, that's why it has to say Dayish, only that which grows from the ground. Okay, we go further. As we welcome in Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg joining us over here. Mo, every word that we learn should make you feel better. Every word. You know, it says, Reb Irving Bunim says a beautiful thing. He says, Rifais hila sharecha, learning brings cure to the navel, ulechol b'sarai marpe, and healing to all flesh. So our learning should bring you good health.
Thank you.
I'm telling you, Mo, it's. I don't know how anybody can miss a share when they see you learning with pneumonia and COVID from the hospital. I mean, I don't know how anybody could miss a share. It's Mo, you're an inspiration to all of us. Says the Gemara, Tani idach, dayish. Ma dayish miyuchid. Just like threshing is distinguished. Davar shebishas gemar malacha payaloichel bay. It's something that at the conclusion of its malacha, a worker could eat it. Af kol shu b'shas gemar malacha. So also anything that it's at the conclusion of its processing, now, that comes to exclude, remember we said that if it's attached to the ground, and let's say Marshall is weeding, if he's weeding out the weeds, he can't eat the fruit while he's weeding, because that's not the end of the process. If he's weeding garlic and onions, since it's not the finishing process, So the Gemara says, I don't need dayish for that. We learned that out from Vel Kel Yechalo Yitain. Lamali. Mel Kel Yechalo Yitain Nafka. We learned it out that you're not allowed to put it in your own basket. You could eat it, but you can't put it in your basket. So it's a time when you're putting it in the basket, which means at the end of the process. Says, well, the Chiddush over here is when Marshall is weeding, he's weeding the stunted onions. Those are onions that'll never ripen. So he's pulling it out in order to give more room for the good ones to grow. But they are still onions, and he's not throwing them away. He's putting it in the owner's basket. So I might think that those stunted onions, Marshall is allowed to eat. But since it's not the finale of the process, Dayish tells us he's not allowed to eat it. It's a big chiddush. Says the Gemara, like tzricha afal gab the kamishlif ketine mebene alime. Even though he's taking out the weak onions and the weak garlic from the strong fat ones, and he's not throwing them away. He's putting it in a basket. So I might think he's then allowed to eat it. So Kamash Malan, that he's not. Tani Idach, we learned in another Abraisa, and I want to welcome in Moshe Lehman, who's just joining us, and Mitchell Flam, who's just joining us. Great to have all of you here on this beautiful evening. Tani Idach, we learned in another Abraisa, Dayish, ma dayish miyuchid, davar shaloi nigmara malachtoi l'maiser. It's not yet finished to be tithed for meiser. So we said that, you see, because threshing is when it's detached from the ground. So when it's detached from the ground, we said the worker could eat up till the point where it's chayiv in meiser. So just like Dayish is miyuchad davar shaloi nigmar malachtoi l'maiser payel oichel bay. Af kol shaloi nigmar malachtoi l'maiser payel oichel bay. So also, if it's in a stage where it's not yet ready to be tied, the worker could eat it. Yotza, this comes to exclude that if dates and figs were already made into cakes, so it's already chayiv and meiser, and you hired Shelley to separate those cakes. Since it's already chayiv and meiser, Shelley can't eat it anymore. Yotza boidel b'tmarim u'b'greigeris, if you hired him to separate cakes of dates or figs, hoyel v'nigmar malachta l'meiser, since it was already a chayiv to be tied, ain't payel oichel bay. So the Gemara says, yeah, but there's a brisa that says not that way. V'atani, we learned in a brisa, boidel b'tmarim u'b'greigeris, if let's say Steve separates dates and figs, he's allowed to eat. So we just said, that's very confusing. We just said that Shelley can't eat from it because it was already chayiv and meiser when it was made into cakes. Amra Papa, no, the case of Steve was talking about Kitan Yahi b'tuchloni. There it's talking about dates that were not ripe yet. And they put them in a basket to ripen. And when they were in the basket, they hired Steve to separate them. So there, since it didn't ripen yet, it's not chayiv yet in meiser, and that's why he's allowed to eat it. Okay? Another brisa. Tani Ida. Tani Ida, we learned in another brisa. Dayish, ma dayish miyuchid davar shaloi nigmara malachtoi l'chala. It was not yet chayiv in chala upayel oichel bay. Af kol davar shaloi nigmara malachtoi l'chala. If it was not yet chayiv for the reishis harisei seichem to be removed from it, the chala So this comes to tell me that a worker can't eat when he's working with the dough. Yatsa halosh, if he's kneading the dough, v'makatef, or shaping it, v'oifa, or baking it. In all these stages, it's chayiv already in challah. Shenigmar al-machta l'challah, so then the worker can't eat from it. Dein payal oichel bay. Says the Gemara, well, duh. If it's already in a dough, it was already chayiv and meiser. So you already couldn't eat from it because it was chayiv and meiser. Why do you have to say this? V'aloi nigmar al-machta l'meiser. Says the Gemara, like kasha, it's talking about b'chutz ha'aretz. It's talking about outside of Eretz Yisrael. B'chutz ha'aretz askina doleka meiser. There's no biblical meiser. So the Gemara says, "Yachi chala nami leka." There's no biblical chala either. Elolaylam ba'aretz. It's talking about in Eretz Yisrael. But we're going to find 14 years where there's no chiyuv meiser, but there is chiyuv chala. V'loy kasha b'sheva shekivshu. When we crossed the Yarden, the first 7 years we conquered the land, or b'sheva shechilku, and the next 7 years he gave the land. Yeshua gave the land to the people. The Amar Ma Sheva Shekivsha v'Sheva Shechilkai, the 7 years of conquest and the 7 years when the land was divided, Nischayvu b'Chala, there was a chiyuv of Chala, v'loi Nischayvu b'Maiser. Says the Gemara, yeah, but Meiser is not, it's not because it's chayiv and Meiser. That's not the reason. The reason is that it's a stage where it's considered complete. Midei Meiser kagarim, is it the chiyuv Meiser that makes it that the worker can't eat it? Gemar malacha kagarim, it's because that at that stage, like for example, when you make it into the figs into a cake, it's considered completed, and that's why the poil can't eat from it. Ella Amar Ravina says you're right. Kroich v'tani. What you have to do is you have to put it together. Dayish, ma dayish miyuchad. Davar shaloi nigmar malachta l'maiser or l'chala. Something that's not finished for maiser or for chala or poil oichel bay. The worker could eat it. Af kol shaloi nigmar malachta l'maiser or l'chala poil oichel bay. Which means that if it's something that doesn't have a stage of chala, it's fruit. So there it's finished when it's chayiv and meiser. If it's grain that is chayiv and chala, then the poil could eat it until it becomes chayiv and chala. Okay, now we learned in the Mishnah that Rich, if I hire Rich to work for me, he's allowed to, when he harvests the grapes, he's allowed to eat the grapes. We said, but what he's not allowed to do is he's not allowed to have the grapes v'davaracha. That means that he can't take the grapes and dip them into salt and eat it, because that will cause him to eat more. So that he's not allowed to do. So now the Gemara asks, can Rich take the grapes, since it's Memorial Day, when everybody barbecues? Here it was raining, right? When everybody barbecues. So I didn't barbecue, but anyway, Nah, I didn't barbecue. My Rebbitzin isn't really into barbecuing. To barbecue for myself, so in the summer I do it, but here
come over, I'll barbecue.
Yeah. If you come over, I'll barbecue.
I may take you up on that.
Yeah, if you come over, I'll buy. I have a very nice barbecue grill in the back.
I think you can afford it, man.
Huh?
It's a good idea for a siyum.
It really is. It really would be nice to make, I would have my son bring over another grill and we could barbecue for a siyum. It would really be a nice thing.
Well, we still need Seder Nashim, don't we?
We do, and Bava Metzia deserves a siyum she'en kamayu. I mean,
we'll have to do more to give it a little ribbis too.
Yeah. No, Bava Metzia deserves I'll tell you, my son has a Kinyan Masechta share in the 5 towns, a very successful Kinyan Masechta share, and they finishing Sukkah, and he has a very wealthy item, and they're renting a mansion in Lawrence, and they're making a Friday night meal for the entire share with their wives and their children, and really he's making a whole thing. And I heard there's a tab on the CM of $25,000. That's what they're saying.
Guys, we're in the wrong year.
Right. But anyway,
Yudazakta did that same thing a couple months ago when he finished the Masechta. That was the second one he finished.
that's wonderful.
He made a Friday night for the whole family.
Yeah, so if you remember, Rabbi Isa, I flew to L.A., and in L.A., the Weiss family in L.A. he gives a share, and he did that for the Siyam on Seder Noshim. He made a tent in his backyard, and he invited the entire share with the wives and the children. It is a beautiful thing, because then the wives and the children get to see what it's all about and the excitement. It is a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Okay, so 5 lines from the bottom of Peites Amud Aleph. So here we're going back to Rich over here, because he's hungry. Ibayalu, Poyel Maushi Yahavev Be'ar V'yoichel. Can he take the grapes? We know you can't dip it into salt, but can he toast it over the fire? And that makes it more delectable, and he'll eat more. Mi havi kanovim v'dovaracher. Is that like grapes dipped in salt? Or maybe not. Tajma, Rashi Balabayas, Lahashkais. Now here I'm clever. I know Rich is going to eat me out of. I'm not going to have any grapes left. So Rashi Balabayas Lahashkais Poyelim Yayin. I could give Rich wine to drink, because I get him drunk and he won't eat a lot of grapes. Rashoyim Poyelin, and workers are allowed. Listen to what Rich could do. He's smarter. He's smart aleck. He could bring a lunchbox, and he could letavel pitam betzir. He could dip some of it. He likes Italian bread. He dips his Italian bread into some brine, in the real Italian way, because that will whet his appetite to eat a lot of grapes. So says the Gemara, that's different. That he could do, because he's not doing it to the grapes. Says the Gemara, to do something, this is a new application of Gavra and Chefza. To do something to the mensch, to get him to be more hungry by whetting his appetite and dipping bread and brine, that he could do. But could he do something to the grape itself? Right? Maybe that's like dipping it into salt. So Marshall is getting hungry. Says the Gemara, Tajma, Poyelin Oichlin Anovim. So here, Rich is allowed to hold his appetite to eat the grapes, beroshe umaniyoi shalem, to eat the grapes at the front of the row. The front row of the vineyard, which gets the full baking of the sun, is the most delectable grapes. Now, Rich is a connoisseur. He could hold his appetite until he gets to that row and eat away. As long as he doesn't toast it in fire. So that's the answer. No toasting marshmallows, Rich. No toasting grapes. Says that's different. That's because it takes him time. And he's not allowed to take the time away from the work. He's a paid workman. Hasam misham bitul malacha. So then what's the shaila? The shaila is Rich brings his wife with him. Is his wife allowed to toast it for him so he could eat it? Says the Gemara, Ki kamabayla neichadika ishtayabanav. He has his wife and his children with him. What's the din? So says the Gemara, it's great to have Moshe Jackman joining us. Moshe, it's good to have you join us as we are holding on Daf Pei Tes Amud Beis. Tomorrow's Daf, by the way, is a tzaddik. All tzaddikim should come tomorrow. Tomorrow's Daf is a tzaddik. So says the Gemara, we're holding Moshe 6 lines from the top of Pei Tes Amud Beis. Tajma, lo yahavev ba'or v'yoichel. Rich can't toast it in the fire and eat it. V'lo yichmor ba'adama v'yoichel. He can't bury it in the ground and eat it. The burying it in the ground will cause it to be warmer. V'lo yifreich al gabei sela. Nor can he smash it against a rock, which causes the juice to come out and makes it more delectable. Aval mafrich al yad, he could rub it in his hand v'oichel. Says the Gemara, again over there, the reason is because of wasting time from work. Hasa mishum bitul malacha. And achanami mistavra. The isol kedaitach mishum misukei peira. If it's because of sweetening the fruit, the Gemara wonders, sela my misukei peira. How does smashing it against a rock sweeten the fruit? You see, it's only usher if it sweetens it and it causes him to eat more grapes. The Gemara says now, no, the reason why he did it is to make it softer so it should be easier for him to eat, but it's not going to cause him to eat more grapes. So the Gemara says, no, it's not true. It's not possible. That's not a raya, because it's not possible that when you smash it, it does get a little sweeter, because as I said, the juice comes outside. So Tashma, Poyalin Shahayu Oidrim B'Te'enim. Workers that are hoeing with figs. V'Goidrin B'Tmarim. Oidrim over here means these are all languages of harvesting. This is Oidrim is B'Te'enim, harvesting figs, V'Goidrim B'Tmarim, harvesting dates, Beitzim Ba'anavim, vintaging grapes, Omaiskim B'Zeisim, pruning the olives. So these are all the Gemar Malacha. So Hari Elu Oichlin, they could eat. Now you might think maybe they could eat, but they're like a buyer. And therefore they have to tie. No, Upaturim, they don't have a din of a buyer. Shat Torah Zichsalahem, because the Torah granted it to them. They're not a buyer. It's not Nigmar Lamaiser, and therefore they don't have to tie. However, Bepitam Lo Yoichlu, together with bread, if they eat it together with bread, then that causes them to eat more. And that you're not allowed to do, right? That you're not allowed to do. Repitam lo yachlu, elim ke notlu rishus mabalabayis. V'lo yispais b'melech, you're not allowed to dip it in salt, v'yoichel. So says the Gemara, well, that we know. Salt is like eating it with bread. That's adding something else to the grape. Melech vaday kanovim v'davarachadami. That's like eating it with bread. Says the Gemara, but maybe just toasting it in the fire, so you're not adding something to it, maybe that's allowed. Says the Gemara, is it true you can't dip it in salt? V'lo yispais b'melech v'yoichel? You're not allowed to dip it in salt and eat it? B'remino. If I hire Mo, because Mo is going to get better real soon. If I hire Mo, la'ader to hoe. Now hoe is not a finishing process. Or l'kashkesh tachas hazeisim, or put earth to cover the roots under the olive tree. Though those are not finishing processes, harizel lo yoichel, he's not allowed to eat. Sachrei livta, but if I hire him to harvest the grapes, sachru limsak, to prune the olives, sachru lake, or I have him hire him to gather other fruits, harizel eichel pater, he could eat shatayra zichzalan, because the Torah was zeichet to him, and remember he's not like a buyer, because the Torah granted it to him. Katzatz, but if he wants to eat while he hoes, so he makes up with me, Rabbi Weiss, I stipulate that I should be able to eat while I hoe, then that's like a purchase, because the Torah doesn't give it to him. Once it's a purchase, he would have to take off tithes. But if he eats it achas yoichel, if he takes it one by one, then it's not chayiv in tithes, because it's only chayiv in tithes if it's a geirin, and it's only a geirin if it's two. So achas yoichel, shtayim, 2 by 2 lo yoichel. And here it says v'soifes b'melech v'yoichel. He could add salt to it and eat it. Now, hi. There he stipulated that it's his. It's like a purchase, so of course he could dip it in salt. Gave him the kotzas, he could do whatever he wants with it. Elulav aresha. So you see that you're allowed to dip it in salt, even if you're a pile eating by the Gemar Malacha. So Abaye tries to reconcile this contradiction as follows. Amar Abaye loy kasha, kan ba'aretz, kan b'chutzlarz. One is in Eretz Yisrael where it's Daraisa. One is where in Chutzlarz where it's Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, therefore, be'eretz kava svisa, in Eretz Yisrael, and the reason why dipping it in salt is forbidden is not because dipping it in salt is like anovim b'davar acha, which is going to cause him to eat more grapes. The reason is because when he dips it in salt, it makes it nigmar lamaisa. So the aretz kavas visa, the dipping it in the salt is considered making it chayv a meiser. But chutzlar, it's like kavas visa. Since it's only the rabbanan, it doesn't make it chayv a meiser. Rava doesn't buy that, because Rava says we say called the tikkun rabbanan ke'ein daraisa tikkun. And therefore, I'm a Rava mikemide de be'eretz kavas svisa midaraisa. Then Eretz Yisrael dipping it in salt would be kaved for ma'isa, but chutzlar it's like kavas svisa or mutter lechatchila, and it's be mutter in the first instance. Ela Amar Rava bein be'eretz bein bechutzlaretz, both in Eretz Yisrael and in chutzlaretz. Chada loy kava. If you eat them one at a time, chada loy kava svisa. If you dip it in salt, that's not enough to be kaved or ma'isa. Tarte, if it's two at a time, there kava svisasa. Therefore, katatz, if most stipulated that he should be able to eat it, he had to stipulate because it was talking about during hoeing, during covering the roots, which is not a finishing malacha. So the Torah doesn't award it to him. So katzatz, so that's like a purchase. Purchase is a kaveh l'maisa, but only if it's two, which is a geirin. So katzatz, by stipulation, bein safas, bein loy safas, achas eichel, he could eat it one at a time. Shtayim loy eichel, even if he doesn't dip it in salt, because once it's two, since he bought it, it's considered like a purchase, it's kaveh l'maisa. Loy katzatz, if he didn't stipulate, it's talking about where the Torah grants it to him because he's doing it when he harvests, and it's a finishing process where the Torah grants it to him. So loy katzatz, he didn't stipulate, v'loy safas, and he didn't dip it in salt. So oichel shtayim, he could eat two at a time because it's not considered a purchase. It's considered the Torah was mazaket to him. Safas, but if he dips it in salt, even though it's not a purchase, achas eichel, one at a time he could eat it. Shtayim, the fact that it's already finished, and he's doing it 2 at a time, so it's a geirin, and he salts it, which makes it finished. L'maiser lo yarchel. And this is true. V'afal gav denoto rishus mebalabayis. And this is true even if he took permission from the balabayis to salt it, because otherwise it might be a problem of anovim v'davar achar. But even if he took permission from the balabayis to eat it, still to do it, he still would have to take off meiser, because the itfalu l'meiser, it's taivel for meiser. The kovas visasa, and once it reaches the stage of a geirin, 2, and it's dipped in salt, even though it's not a purchase, he would have to take meiser. Says the Gemara, "Vitarte de kovas visa midalon." How do we know if he dips it in salt when there's 2? It's considered hutful a meiser. Amar amasna damar kra ki koftzam. He gathered them ka omer geirana, like a pile for the threshing floor, and a meat of a pile is 2. So once it's 2, it's considered a geirin, and therefore once it's a geirin, even though it's not a purchase, because it was at the time of harvesting, so he was allowed to take it, min hashemayim zichsa, but the fact that he dips it in salt, it kaveh for meiser, and salting, shouldn't that be a problem of anovim v'davar achar? The teretz is it's talking about where the owner gave him rishus, so he could dip it because the owner gave him rishus, but the fact that he salts it is kaveh l'meiser. Okay, Rabbi Say, again tomorrow night. I shoot for 10 to 9, and I do my best. That's what we're shooting for. We're going to learn the Mishnah Yomis now, which is a very fascinating Mishnah Yomis.
Good night, Rabbi. I have to catch the only Marav in Tannersville.
Okay, you're lucky you have such a Marav.
Yes.
You're the best guy, right?
No,